Thank you, Mr. Wong. It was very insightful. Next, we have the question and answer session. I would like to request Professor Harris to chair the session.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. The time has got on, so let us move quickly into the question and answer session. I'd just like first to thank both speakers for extremely insightful and raising lots of really interesting and very important issues. I think the subject of clean water and waste management is probably not sort of the most immediately exciting kind of title for a discussion, but there are a few things, in my view, which are actually more important, certainly in regards to Indian cities. Before I open to the floor, am I right in thinking, if I remember correctly, from a very nice little film I've seen on a couple of occasions when I've been to the cinema in Singapore in the last few weeks, that Singapore is responsible for the institution of International Toilet Day? Is that right?
I've not been to the cinema in the last few weeks, last month, but you are right. There's this gentleman, Ron Sim, who started this thing. When he first started the idea, everybody was saying, ridiculing him. But I think he got the attention of United Nations, and actually there was an international world toilet.
No, I think I thought the little film was really really excellent and makes some tremendously important points.
It started because
Singaporeans are not that great when it comes to public toilets. So that was, honestly.
No. Anyway, the floor is open to your questions. I have some of my own, but let me open it first of all to you. Please.
Dr. Isha, Dr. Wong, or Mr. Wong, thank you so much for your talk. Dr. Isha, I also came to your talk yesterday as well. My name is Pragya, and my questions, I actually have so many questions for you, but I'll probably keep them to one. You spoke about yesterday and today. Today you didn't talk so much about the aspect of leadership, but I know this is something also that you didn't talk about much, Mr. Wong, but I'm sure it had a huge, huge part in the whole Singapore water story, wastewater story. Can you talk about specifically what characteristics, particularly in the Indian setting, but also compared to the Singapore setting, defines a good leader in this particular space?
Can we take a few questions?
Yes, that's what I thought. I thought we take 2 or 3 at a time, if that's all right.
One of the problems of a successful potable and other kind of water distribution problem is what I'm about to say just at this point in time. In Bangladesh, we had initially a very successful tube well project, which was funded by SIDA, Swedish SIDA. Then it grew larger and we got IDA credit for that. An immensely successful program. But then the water table began to come down. And as a result, now we have a horrific problem, which is arsenic poisoning. This is not just Bangladesh. I mean, there are many states in India which are also involved in West Bengal. So what does one do? I mean, arsenic poisoning is a huge issue. It is ironically the result of a very successful water. I mean, the dimensions are huge in Bangladesh, it's not 180 million. So now, what is to be done? I mean, how do you handle a problem like that?
Please.
My name is Charles Chow. My name is Charles Chow. I'm running private business. Maybe just a question to the panel. Singapore's water is drinkable, but you put a lot of chlorine into it. And because of that, I think the women on their boards are so cranky. One shortfall, that's a problem. I think it's a universal problem. Not only the water safe, we put a lot of chemicals into it. Question other alternatives to make it safer. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps perhaps I might just add a question of mine. Not to this first round. Dr. Aluwalia, you referred to the problem of opposition to user charges and said that this problem had been overcome in Mercury. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about how opposition to user charges has been overcome. And Mr. Wong, I wondered whether you might comment on water charges and here in Singapore. Okay, sure. Please. First, Dr. Aluwalia.
I think let me first get the
All right.
wisdom
Mr. Wong.
I mean, if you can find.
Okay. Quickly on leadership. Actually, the most important thing in our Singapore management of water, wastewater, is political leadership. Political will and political, well, you can say the vision. There must be a very common vision, but there must be political will to carry it through. Because some of the things that you have to do to achieve the result may not be popular measures, at least at the initial stages, to the people. You have to do some resettlement, you have to move people around, you have to make way for sewer lines and things like that. We were quite fortunate. We are a democracy, but we have the same party for the last 45 years. And we have a very far-sighted leader in Lee Kuan Yew. Two key things related to cleaning up is actually his idea. The first one was the cleaning up of Singapore. He threw a challenge, but actually he instructed. It's more like, even though you're not press to say he challenged the public officers to clean up the Singapore river in 10 years. Basically, it's an offer you can't refuse. But they did it, so in 10 years. And do you know that on the day that we commemorate that success in cleaning up the river, he threw another challenge. Make the Singapore River into a drinking water reservoir by damming up the Singapore River. He admitted then that the technology there was not good enough, but maybe in 20 years we can do it. The date the Berliner Barrage was up was almost exactly 20 years. I'm not sure whether we're trying to fit in there or whatever, but that's the vision of one man. And therefore, we can carry it through. So that's leadership is most important. That's, I agree. All right. Drop in water table, we don't have much problem here. Basically, because we don't have groundwater. You can dig until when you don't have groundwater, which is another problem in our case in a way, because we are cut off from that source. So maybe that one I leave to the doctor to answer that. Chlorine, yes. We look at that very closely, but unfortunately, or whatever, that is still the most practical way of, disinfecting the river and everything. What we try to do, we monitor. And we try to reduce the residual chlorine to as much as possible. We have looked at others, we look at fluoridations and put in fluoride. There are pros and cons. I would admit that I'm no longer in PUB, so I can, but I think they're still sort of using chlorination as the basic sort of endpoint disinfection for the last bit. All right, I think that's I should answer that. Water charges. Singapore water charges is very interesting. We have two tariff levels, all right? This is geared towards water saving. If your household consumption is less than 40 meter cubes of water a day, that's one tariff. I think I've got it down here correctly, it's $1.17 per meter cube, regardless of the size of the household. And that's the point of contention. Because the metering is done on a household basis, it's really difficult to track how many. You say, okay, 40 square meter cube of water, if you exceed that, for the extra, anything beyond 40 square meter cube, you pay a different rate of, I think, what I go down here is $1.40. So it's two. In other words, it encourages households to save water. Okay, so that's one. And that's not the only charge. We have what we call water conservation tax. This is a direct percentage of the amount of water you use. If it's less than 40 meter cube, the water conservation tax is 30% of the water bill, of the initial tariff. So you're actually paying 1.3 times more, basically. Anything above 40 meter cube, it is 40%. So those of you, I'm quite sure most of you would not know that. Because nowadays your water bills are all paid by gyro. You don't really look at it and you pay. That's what happened. Quietly or whatever, PUB will have all this thing. And that's not the end of the story. We have another one called the water bond fee. The water bond fee is almost an indirect, and there's sometimes people ask us, where do you get the funding for your wastewater treatment facilities? The water bond fee contributes to it. It doesn't totally love it. So we charge household every month, not once off. I think it's 30 cents per meter cube. What we call, this is contributing to our wastewater development charges, your capital investment, new pipes, old pipes, replacements of pipes. So there's another 30 cents per meter cube. There's one more. Every toilet in your house, you pay $3 a month. You know that? You mean you don't know that?
I think last two part we don't know.
Well, look at your water bill. You have any complaint, don't complain to me, complain to you. I think that's the rationale of it. So there's a lot of charges going into your water bill. But you may not know because overall it seems that the water bill is still manageable, which is why everybody doesn't look at it so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr.
Your question about what defines good leadership. You know, in Indian cities and towns, there is not that much political autonomy. So even if you have a good leader, if at the state government level, where the principal action is, if you don't have a progressive chief minister who learns how to devolve funding and autonomy to actually make these people accountable, you won't achieve very much. By and large, at the local government level, the mayors and all are also not very inspiring leaders. What has, where I see sort of change is when you have a municipal commissioner who is dynamic and very progressive. So you would say then this is just luck that you have someone? No, but I would go a little bit beyond that to say that in India, we have actually clogged up the system so much with so many rigidities and giving veto at every level to every administrative officer, that no matter how great a political leader you are, if the system is one which first encourages hedging, discourages risk-taking in case you are an officer and you take an action and you fail, then you will be penalized heavily. But if you don't do anything, you won't be penalized. So, you know, there are some systemic changes. It won't, in India, it will not be solved by just saying get good leaders, because even if you had the most dynamic and well-meaning Prime Minister, Chief Minister, and let's say city mayor who wanted to do something, the systems are such that you could actually face a lot of resistance. That is not to say that these dynamic leaders are not important, but that's why what I said was your no wrong door kind of thing, that appealed to me even greater, because I think a smart political leader can introduce that one change into the system, but then he or she will also have to change the system and move it towards a risk-reward balance, which is missing in our system. So it's not, I'm giving a long-winded answer to a simple question, but nevertheless, the truth is that in each of these stories that I have written, there is at least one champion and sometimes more, and I can sort of see their faces, I can see their enthusiasm. They are not even all the time mayors or commissioners. There's one deputy commissioner in Coimbatore
who has been working on solid waste management for 20 years, and how enthused he was that he finally got some funding for a project from the JNNURM and what he was able to accomplish. So, you know, this is only telling that story, but there is a larger story of changing our institutions to adapt them to a modern functioning system. Yeah. The point you make about tube wells is so important. In fact, you know, I am on the board of International Water Management Institute. And last year or 2 years ago, I heard that they have set up the same thing in West Bengal. And I was horrified because my first reaction was that, but you know what's happening in Bangladesh. And you know, the truth is that there are no shortcuts to the natural cycle of water. Instead of trying to have catchments, to have rainwater harvesting, and those kinds of things, you are going for these shortcut solutions, and these are not sustainable. And they can pose grave danger to public health. In Chennai, in 1 year, with making rainwater harvesting mandatory, they have been able to see the groundwater level, the water table has increased. So we know, again, this is not rocket science, you know, this is simple. But somehow, everybody in a rush to prove that they are doing something, you know, for the farmers in West Bengal, a new government has come and goes to IFMI has to show it can do something. They go and do something which is proven not to be the right thing to do in Bangladesh. And finally, on the opposition to user charges. You know, I think, as I said, you have to cut into this chicken and egg problem. In some areas, and I think more in Malkapur even than in Nagpur, you can actually bring people over, communicate with them effectively to convince them that they need to develop a willingness to pay and they'll get better service. But in Nagpur, even when that was done, there was an NGO that came up, you know, overnight, which was trying to develop the unwillingness to charge on the part of the politician. So even when you have willingness to pay, there are those who have their own interests in trying to get the politicians to say, no, don't charge. So this is really a game of vested interests, and you win some, you lose some. The only hope is that as you win more and more, there is greater demonstration effect, that when you agree to pay and when the service does improve and is regular, that you took the right decision and more communities would want to get onto that bandwagon. When we will reach that tipping point is anybody's guess. Thank you.
Maybe just one small question. If I'm not wrong, government is subsidizing a lot on the water to the public, am I right?
Sorry, which government?
The Indian government or the whatever. Right now when the water is supplied to the public, I think the water is subsidized, am I right?
Water is subsidized.
The cost of distributing the water is higher, but it charged less because of what you said, vested interest. So, but you said the reason there is opposition of the price is because they have seen this bad quality of service for so many years. So suddenly they don't want to pay. Why not this should be given to a Singapore here, the project. And that Singapore, because their cost of funding is also low, they can develop those projects, and then the government instead of subsidizing, the customer can pay to the Singapore institution, whosoever does the project. It can be a government, it can be privatized. I mean, just a thought. I mean, otherwise, sorry, just let me finish. Yeah. Otherwise, the way you told me 9 years you have spent on this, I think it's a long way to go to cover the whole India in terms of supplying the water.
No, I think you are right, but you know what is actually happening is that as with electricity, where we have an electricity regulator who sets the tariffs according to a certain formula, and there is an Electricity Act which now makes it mandatory for state distribution companies or any distribution companies to charge that tariff, and if the state wants to subsidize, they have to pay the company. And that's working in some places. In other places, they just browbeat the company into accepting delayed payments or deferred payments, and liabilities increase. But it's a first step in that direction. In water also, in some cases, there is talk of having a water regulator, water utility regulator, whose task it will be. So you distance the pricing from the local government or the state government. So the political leaders can say somebody else has, done this. And yeah, you're right. No, we cannot wait. That is very clear. But my sense is that there is an upsurge today, and we are very chaotic. We would never do things very systematically. But in all this chaos, I see that new solutions are emerging. And as they prove to work in one area, other state governments also pay attention. But there would be some, there are lumpen elements, and they would want to give water free to everybody. You can't control that in a democracy, but hopefully they will learn the lesson the right way.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm being instructed by management over there to draw the session to a close. But I would really like myself to ask one further question.
Privilege, Chairman.
And so, forgive me, my dear friend. But I was struck by Professor Srivastava talking about the development here of a program on tri-sector management. So, Mr. Wong, in tri-sector being public, private and civil society, in your presentation regarding the Singapore experience, civil society didn't appear at all. So did civil society have no presence? In India, I mean, it seems to me that in regards to water and sanitation, this is classically a sector in which there needs to be partnership between the state and local communities. The state provides the big pipe, so to say, and local communities do the local planning. I mean, do we have that sort of experience in India?
It's certainly the demand is very strident now, and it's happening in some places.
Mm-hmm.
Not enough, but it's certainly happening. And in fact, through e-governance, state governments have actually set up protocol of when there are grievances, how quickly they would be addressed and who would be accountable. And all this goes through the back-end integration of software packages. There are cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, in Kalyan Dombivli, just outside of Mumbai in Maharashtra, Pimpri Chinchwad and Pune in Maharashtra are doing really this kind of engagement of civil society. But let me tell you one interesting incident that I wouldn't name the politician and I wouldn't name the city, but in one case when the e-governance was really making a big difference, that people knew where to go for what. There was a manual that was prepared, and this was available in a web format. It was online. There was access to SMS. There was a book in the regional language in English. So any question that you ever wanted to ask about your interface with the government, where you should go, it had the answer. And the councillor for the town actually pulled up the municipal commissioner and said, I used to get 400 people every Sunday to come and see me to get their work done. Now I don't even get 40. So, that's the... So this means that something is working, and we are just going to see more and more of that. We need to push the pace.
Thank you. You want to say something? Okay.
In the areas of water treatment, it is I told you it's still strategic. So all water resource planning, management, operation of the treatment plant is all run by the government. There's no private sector operator involved. The public are involved more, I did mention it earlier, but on the education, the awareness, they can be party to own the water cost responsible. We get the schools in to keep sure to sort of sell them the idea of the water must be kept clean. And we open the reservoir now to people who do the boating, kayaking, canoeing, and all that. So they become part of the water, and now that they are using it, they become protector of the environment. Rather than you all keep away from the water, this is for your drinking, don't get involved. Then the people who actually forbidden fruits pay to sweeters, they just try to get it even. So that's where the public sector gets involved, in the water. But treatment, water, planning, no, still government. All right. But in the area of new water, the downstream where we produce, that in fact, the 2 or 3 water treatment, new water production plant that we have, they are all privately run. That means it's in the private hands. They operate it, they produce water, they sell it back to the government. So in that sense, there's a public and a private involvement. The people's involvement in most of this, okay, even garbage collection, like I said, the collection of rubbish is now done by private company contractors. Incineration of the 4, 2 are now operated privately, by private contractors, I mean, on a contract basis. 2 are still in government, but slowly that also be run in, be sort of contracted to private. In most of these cases, when it comes into this private hygiene and public health, the people involvement is more in the education, the protection of the environment, in the more the softer thing rather than in the direct management and running of the place.
I'd like now to thank both speakers very much for a very interesting afternoon, Dr. Ahluwalia and Mr. Wong. And it falls to me first, Dr. Ahluwalia, and similarly to Mr.
Thank
Wong. Now I think it's tea time. Yes. Right.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of today's seminar. We hope you found the session enriching, and we'd like to invite you for a tea reception outside. We would also appreciate if you could fill in the feedback forms and drop it into the feedback box just outside at the registration table. Thank you and have a good evening.